I never imagined that a single day could make me question everything about myself and still leave me feeling stronger than I ever had before. My name is Grace, and I have always considered myself someone who tries to see the good in people. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and news traveled faster than the wind in the fall. My family was close, but not perfect. There were moments of love that felt like sunshine on a winter morning and moments of silence that felt heavier than the heaviest snow. I had always tried to find my way in the middle of it all, to be kind without losing myself, to be helpful without being taken for granted. Life had never been easy for me. I had grown up working long hours at the local diner, cleaning tables, washing dishes, doing the things people didn't notice but everyone depended on. It wasn't glamorous and it certainly wasn't easy, but I found satisfaction in small victories like making someone smile or being there for someone when they needed a hand. When my cousin called me one afternoon with what she called an opportunity, I thought it would be just another task I could handle. She explained that her friend was having a big wedding in the city and they were struggling to find someone responsible enough to watch 15 children at once. 15! I remember pausing for a moment, imagining what that might look like. 15 tiny hands grabbing at everything in sight, voices overlapping, chaos in motion. My first instinct was to say no, but then my cousin added that they trusted me, that they knew I was responsible, that they thought I could do it. And for some reason, maybe out of pride or maybe out of a desire to prove myself, I said yes. Over the next few days, I tried to prepare myself. I bought snacks, planned games, and made lists of children's names with their ages and allergies. I imagined the wedding hall, the music, the laughter, the little feet running across polished floors. I even tried to picture myself managing all of them calmly, smiling through the chaos, but something in my heart began to whisper doubts. I had plans of my own, plans I had been waiting on for months. A small art exhibit in the city that I had poured my soul into, a chance to finally show my work to people who might appreciate it. And now it seemed that my family was expecting me to set that aside, to step into a role that would take every ounce of patience and energy I had. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a woman torn between duty and desire. I loved my family, I loved my nieces and nephews, but I also loved myself, and I realized that saying yes out of obligation wasn't kindness. It was sacrifice, yes, but not the kind that felt right anymore. I took a deep breath and made a decision that shook me to my core. I called my cousin and explained that I couldn't do it, that I had to honor my own dreams today, that I couldn't step into a role that would demand everything from me when I had worked so hard to carve out something for myself. Her voice on the other end was a mix of surprise and disappointment. I felt a pang of guilt that almost made me falter. I wanted to apologize, to explain every tiny reason, but I also knew that I had to stay firm, and so I did. I stayed firm. And then, after the call ended, I packed my small bag and drove to the gallery, feeling a strange mix of fear and freedom. Walking into the exhibit was like stepping into a new world. I was surrounded by colors I had spent months perfecting, by paintings that told stories I had lived and felt and survived. People were kind, asking questions, praising details, noticing things I hadn't even thought anyone would see, and in that moment I realized something profound. Courage wasn't always about running into danger or facing a storm. Sometimes it was about facing the fear of disappointing others. Sometimes it was about standing up for yourself, about choosing your own path when every expectation pointed elsewhere. I spent hours at the exhibit, talking to strangers, answering questions, feeling the warmth of genuine connection. And through it all, I kept thinking about what I had learned in the past few days. That kindness is important, yes, but it must be balanced with self-respect. That struggle is never wasted because it builds a foundation of courage you can draw on later. And that inspiration often comes from the smallest acts, from the quiet decisions we make when no one is watching, from the moments we honor ourselves even when it feels wrong to do so. By the time I left the gallery that evening, the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. I drove home slowly, savoring the feeling of accomplishment, of living in alignment with who I truly was. And somewhere deep inside, I felt proud, not because I had avoided chaos or because I had succeeded in my art, but because I had been brave enough to choose myself. I woke up the next morning to silence, which felt almost strange after the whirlwind of the previous days. I had expected anger, disappointment, maybe even a little resentment from my family, but there was only quiet. The sun was just beginning to spill through my bedroom window, soft and golden, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe without guilt. I reminded myself that bravery often felt lonely at first, that standing up for yourself didn't always come with applause or understanding. It sometimes came with silence, judgment, or questions that felt heavier than the truth. By mid-morning, my phone began to ring. It was my cousin again, and I felt a mix of dread and calm as I answered. Her voice was softer this time, tinged with concern rather than frustration. She asked if I was sure about my decision. I told her gently that I had to follow through, that my art exhibit was something I had waited for years. I tried to explain without making her feel like I was abandoning her or the kids. I could hear her sigh on the other end, and I knew she was trying to understand. After we hung up, I felt a strange mixture of relief and worry. I worried about my cousin's friends, about 15 little souls running around the wedding without me there to watch over them. I worried that my choice might hurt someone, even if it was the right thing for me. But then I reminded myself that courage often came with discomfort, that choosing your own path was rarely easy or tidy. And so I carried on, preparing for my day at the gallery, trying to focus on the things I had worked so hard for. As the hours passed, I kept thinking about what it meant to be brave in ways that weren't obvious. People often associate courage with grand gestures. Running into danger, standing in front of a crowd, saving someone from harm. But sometimes bravery was quieter. It was about waking up and saying no when every instinct screamed yes. It was about honoring yourself, even when it risks disappointing others. It was about making choices that feel right in your soul, even if the world doesn't understand. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of the parents of the children I was supposed to watch. It said simply, "We understand." I realized that courage was not a single event. It was a collection of choices, small and large, each one building the foundation for the next. As I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew the road ahead would not always be easy, that there would be days when fear and doubt would knock at my door. But I also knew that I had within me the ability to stand firm, to choose myself, and to do so with kindness and honesty. And in that moment, I felt a quiet pride that no one could take away. That night, I lay in bed thinking about what I had learned, that life often asks us to make hard choices, that the world may not always understand, that love for others is important, yes, but love for yourself is equally essential, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to honor your own path, even when it feels impossible. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, a soft reminder that life keeps moving even when we make choices that others might not understand. I had decided the night before that I would spend the day quietly reflecting before returning home. I still thought about the wedding, about the 15 children, and about my family's faces when they realized I wasn't coming. Guilt lingered like a shadow, but I knew I had made the right choice. Courage often comes with a weight you carry alone. Later that morning, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my cousin sending me pictures from the wedding hall. I stared at the screen, seeing balloons, decorations, tables perfectly set, and then little feet darting in every direction. There were children climbing chairs, tugging at tablecloths, and running after each other in a blur of energy and laughter. I felt a pang in my chest. Part of me wished I were there, part of me glad I had chosen differently. I could almost hear the chaos from my small apartment, as if it were playing out in real life, Through the day, messages kept coming from family and friends. Some thanked me for being honest, others teased me for abandoning the kids. I read each message slowly, taking them in without judgment. I knew my choice was controversial in some ways, but I also knew it was honest. It was rooted in respect for my own dreams and boundaries, and in that honesty, I felt a strange sense of peace. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about the children, 15 young souls with so much energy, curiosity, and innocence. I remembered the little ones I had babysat before, the way their eyes could light up at the simplest things, and the chaos that came from too many of them in one space. I imagined the parents trying to control the storm, voices raised in frustration, tiny shoes squeaking against polished floors. It made me realize that sometimes kindness is not just showing up, but choosing the right time and place to show it. By mid-afternoon, I received a video message from my cousin. I watched it carefully. The children were laughing and playing, but it was clear that it wasn't easy. One little boy had spilled juice across a tablecloth. A toddler had toppled over a chair. Another had started crying because he wanted his mother. In that moment, I felt a rush of empathy and relief at the same time. I wasn't there, but I had chosen to prioritize a different kind of responsibility, my own growth and dreams. And yet, watching the chaos unfold from a distance, I realized something important. Courage wasn't just about protecting yourself. Sometimes it was about observing, learning, and knowing that every choice comes with consequences we can't control. As the evening approached, my cousin sent me one final message from the wedding. She wrote that everything had worked out, that other family members had stepped in to help, and that the children were finally calm and happy, exhausted from a long day of excitement. I smiled softly, feeling a warm relief. It reminded me that life has a way of balancing itself, that even when things seem uncertain, people can rise to the occasion, and sometimes stepping aside allows others to grow in ways you couldn't have imagined. Sitting in my apartment that evening, I thought about how this day had taught me so much about courage, about kindness, about struggle, and about inspiration, about how every choice, even the hardest ones, shapes the person we become. I realized that life is full of these moments where you must weigh your obligations against your dreams, where you must decide if saying yes is truly the kindest thing, or if saying no is an act of love, for yourself and sometimes even for others. That night, as I lay in bed with the quiet hum of the city outside my window, I felt a deep sense of clarity. I knew I had acted with integrity. I had chosen courage over comfort, honesty over convenience, and in doing so, I had discovered a part of myself I hadn't fully trusted before, a part that could stand firm, speak its truth, and still carry love in its heart. And even though I had missed the wedding in person, I realized that I had gained something just as important. I had gained confidence, I had gained understanding, I had gained a quiet proof that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the choices we make when no one is watching, in the patience we give ourselves, in the faith that everything will work out, even if we aren't in control of every little detail. The day after the wedding, the house was quiet again, the chaos of the celebration replaced by the soft hum of everyday life. I woke up slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the streets where children were now walking calmly to school and neighbors waved at one another like nothing extraordinary had happened. It was peaceful, almost ordinary, but I knew inside that life had shifted for me in a subtle, irreversible way. My phone buzzed with messages from my family. Some were short and casual, asking how I felt, congratulating me on my exhibit, expressing relief that everything had gone smoothly. Others were longer, full of emotion, almost confessions of their own. My cousin wrote that she had realized how much she relied on me, how she took my willingness to help for granted, and that she now understood the courage it took for me to step back and choose myself. Reading her words made tears well up in my eyes. I had feared disappointment, criticism, even anger, but instead I was met with understanding, humility, and a kind of love that fell deeper than I had expected. I remembered watching the video of the children at the wedding, the mess, the noise, the laughter, the small crises and accidents. It had been overwhelming, even from a distance. I imagined the parents' exhaustion and relief when everything finally settled, and I realized something important. Sometimes being brave doesn't mean stepping into the storm. Sometimes it means stepping aside and trusting that others can navigate it too, that your courage isn't measured by how much chaos you can handle, but by how honestly you can honor your own path. The afternoon passed quietly, and I found myself reflecting on my own growth. Life had a funny way of testing you, of showing you the difference between obligation and love, between sacrifice and compromise. I thought about all the times I had said yes out of guilt or duty, and how many of those times had left me feeling depleted and unseen. And I felt a quiet determination to change that pattern, to make choices rooted in love and integrity, even when they felt uncomfortable or risky. That evening, my cousin came by my apartment. She brought a small gift from the wedding, a framed photograph of the children smiling, exhausted but happy, sitting around a long table with cupcakes in front of them. She placed it on my kitchen counter and said softly, "I wanted you to have this, so you can remember that your decision didn't hurt anyone. In fact, it taught us something." I looked at her and nodded, feeling my throat tighten with emotion. I wanted to say so many things, to explain how scared I had been to say no, to share the relief and pride I now felt. But instead, I simply smiled and thanked her. Words felt inadequate for the depth of what I was feeling. Over the next few days, life settled into a new rhythm. I returned to my routines, worked on my art, and spent quiet evenings reflecting on what had happened. But the story of the wedding, the children, and my choice lingered in my mind. I realized that courage and kindness are not always the same thing, that they sometimes pull us in different directions, and that true wisdom comes from knowing which path to follow. I began to notice subtle changes in how people treated me. Friends complimented my confidence. My family showed more respect for my decisions, and strangers seemed to sense a quiet strength in me that hadn't been there before. It was as if stepping into my own courage had reshaped not only how I saw myself, but how the world saw me. And it reminded me that inspiration often comes from small, quiet acts, from moments that may seem insignificant but ripple outward in ways we cannot imagine. Late one evening, I sat by my window again, the city lights sparkling in the distance. I thought about all the lessons I had learned, the importance of honesty, of boundaries, of faith in oneself, of trust in others. I thought about the children at the wedding and the parents who had risen to the challenge. I thought about my art and the pride I felt in sharing it with the world. And I realized that life is full of these moments, moments where we are tested, where we must choose between fear and courage, between obligation and love. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had chosen courage. I had chosen kindness, not by sacrificing myself, but by honoring who I truly am. I had learned that bravery is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up in a phone call, a decision, a gentle refusal. Sometimes it is the quiet strength that allows us to live fully, honestly, and with love in our hearts, no matter the challenges we face. Weeks passed and life began to feel steadier, quieter, yet somehow fuller. The wedding had become a memory, a lesson etched into my heart, and I found myself thinking about it often, not with regret, but with clarity. I realized that every choice I make carries weight, not just for me, but for those around me. And I also realized that courage has a way of rippling outward, touching lives in ways you cannot always see. My family, for instance, had begun to change. My cousin no longer assumed I would drop everything for them. Instead, she asked, she listened, she respected my choices. It was a subtle shift at first, almost imperceptible, but over time, it became the new normal. I saw it in the way she paused before asking for help, the way she acknowledged my own priorities, the way she expressed gratitude for the boundaries I had set. And I felt a quiet pride in knowing that my courage, my honesty, had inspired that change. I also noticed it in myself. I no longer felt the same fear when saying no, the same pressure to please everyone, the same guilt when choosing my own path. It was as if the small act of stepping away from the wedding had unlocked something inside me, a confidence, a trust in myself, a knowledge that I could honor my own needs without abandoning love or kindness. And with that confidence came a deeper sense of purpose, a desire to live my life fully, to pursue my passions without hesitation, and to stand firm in my values. One afternoon, I received a message from one of the parents of the children I had been expected to watch. She wrote simply, "Thank you for teaching us that it's okay to honor yourself. We watched you make your choice, even from afar, and it reminded us to be brave too." Reading those words, I felt tears prick at my eyes. I realized then that courage is not just personal. It is contagious. It inspires others even when you are unaware of it. It shows them that love and strength can coexist, that kindness does not mean self-sacrifice, and that honesty can create connection rather than conflict. I began to see changes in other areas of my life as well. My art began to flourish. People were more interested, more engaged, more willing to see the depth behind my work. I spoke with confidence about my process, my inspirations, my struggles, and people listened. They didn't just see paintings, they saw a story, a heart, a life lived with intention. And in their attention, I felt recognized in a way that went beyond praise. I felt understood. At home, small moments of joy began to accumulate. I would wake up early to sketch before the city fully stirred, feeling a quiet excitement in the possibilities of the day. I spent evenings cooking meals that nourished not just my body, but my soul, letting music play softly in the background, savoring each moment of calm. And in those quiet routines, I discovered the extraordinary beauty of ordinary life, the way courage and choice shape not just big events, but everyday experiences, the way living authentically can turn even the simplest day into something meaningful. Sometimes I would think about the wedding again, picturing the chaos of 15 children and the exhausted parents, the laughter and the mess, and I would smile. I realized that life doesn't demand perfection from us. It only asks that we show up, do our best, and trust that our choices, even difficult ones, matter. And when we act with integrity, even when it feels risky, the world has a way of finding balance, of honoring that courage, of reflecting it back to us in ways both seen and unseen. One evening, I was sitting by my window, sketching the city skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon, when I felt a soft knock at the door. It was my cousin holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. She smiled a little shyly and handed them to me. "For you," she said softly, "for being brave." I felt my heart swell as I took the flowers, realizing that the gesture was more than just appreciation. It was recognition, connection, and love wrapped into one simple act. And in that moment, I understood fully that courage is not only about bold decisions, it is about quiet honesty, about showing up for yourself, about letting others see you for who you truly are, and in doing so, inspiring them to find their own strength. A few weeks after the wedding, life continued to settle into a quiet rhythm, but I could feel that something inside me had shifted permanently. There was a calmness in the way I moved through each day, a sense of confidence I had never experienced before. Yet at the same time, there were moments of doubt that crept in unexpectedly, small whispers that reminded me of all the times I had sacrificed my own needs for others, all the years I had allowed fear to dictate my choices. I reminded myself gently that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. One afternoon, I received a call from another cousin, someone who had heard about the wedding and my choice. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, and I could tell she was nervous. "Grace," she said, "I wanted to thank you. I know it wasn't easy, but watching you choose yourself, it made me think about my own life. I've been doing things out of obligation for so long that I've forgotten how to say no. Seeing you do it gave me permission to start." I felt a lump in my throat. The truth was, I hadn't realized how powerful my decision had been. My courage had extended beyond me, giving others the strength to examine their own lives, their own boundaries, their own dreams. That evening, I walked through the city streets, letting the sun warm my face. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from long hours cleaning tables at the diner to late nights painting in my small apartment, to that fateful day when I had chosen myself over the wedding chaos. Each step, each struggle, each quiet act of honesty had led me to this moment of clarity and pride. I realized that life is full of choices that test us, that shape us, that define who we are and who we become. And the most profound ones often come disguised as ordinary decisions, as simple as saying yes or no, as gentle as listening to your own heart. Over the next few days, I found myself reaching out to my family in new ways. I offered help when I could, but I did so with intention, with boundaries, and with the understanding that my needs mattered too. And something beautiful happened. People began to respond differently. They listened, they respected, they expressed gratitude without expectation. It was as if my courage had created a new language in our family. One of honesty, respect, and mutual support. And in seeing that, I felt an immense sense of fulfillment and hope. One rainy afternoon, I found myself thinking about the children at the wedding again. I imagined them growing up, remembering small moments of chaos, laughter, and care. I realized that even though I had not been there physically, my decision had allowed others to step in and show their own strength. Courage, I realized, is rarely solitary. It inspires, it encourages, it creates space for others to rise. And in that way, even absent, I had played a role in shaping their day, their joy, and their memories. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes within myself. I spoke with more confidence, trusted my instincts, and approached life with a sense of purpose I had never known before. I started to share my story with friends, not as a boast, but as an example of how bravery can take many forms. People would listen, nod, sometimes cry, and often thank me for giving them permission to honor their own choices. And every time that happened, I felt a deep warmth in my chest, a quiet reminder that courage, kindness, and honesty are threads that weave through life, connecting us in ways we cannot always see. One evening, I sat by my window with a sketchbook on my lap, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. I thought about all the struggles, the fears, the doubts I had faced, and I realized that every challenge had been a teacher. That courage had not just allowed me to protect my dreams, but it had also taught me patience, empathy, and the power of leading by example. I understood finally that inspiration does not always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from the quiet strength to honor yourself, to live truthfully, and to trust that the choices you make with love will ripple out and touch others in ways you may never fully know. And in that quiet evening, with the rain tapping softly against the window, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had faced fear, uncertainty, and expectation, and I had chosen myself with kindness in my heart. I had discovered that real bravery is quiet, steady, and unwavering. It is in the choices we make when no one is watching. It is in the moments we honor our own worth while still holding love for others. And it is in the realization that living authentically, even in the smallest ways, can change not only our lives, but the lives of everyone around us. Autumn arrived slowly, painting the city in shades of gold and amber, and I felt a quiet sense of renewal in the air. Life had settled into a rhythm, but I could sense a subtle shift within myself that felt profound. I walked through the streets, noticing how the wind stirred the fallen leaves, how children laughed as they chased each other down sidewalks, and how strangers paused to smile at one another. It was ordinary, and yet it was extraordinary in its quiet beauty. One evening, I received an unexpected visit from my aunt. She had always been a strong, gentle presence in my life, someone who had quietly guided me through challenges without ever demanding anything in return. She sat across from me in my small living room, her eyes soft but serious. "Grace," she began, "I've been thinking about what you did at the wedding. I wanted to tell you something important. You showed bravery that many of us have forgotten how to find. You reminded us that kindness doesn't mean giving up your own heart, that courage is choosing yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. You've inspired all of us more than you know." Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I had always believed that courage was something grand, something visible to the world. But in hearing her, I realized that the quiet acts, the moments of honesty, the decisions made in alignment with your heart carry just as much weight. They ripple outward in ways we cannot always see, touching lives in ways we might never fully understand. And in that recognition, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet affirmation that I was exactly where I was meant to be. In the following weeks, my relationships with my family continued to evolve. My cousin, once anxious and insistent, began seeking my advice in ways that showed respect for my boundaries. She laughed more easily, shared her own struggles without guilt, and even thanked me for modeling a kind of bravery she had longed to find in herself. My other relatives, too, began to notice the subtle changes in our family dynamic, how communication was softer, more honest, more considerate, and I realized that the courage to choose yourself does not isolate you. Rather, it invites others to grow alongside you. One afternoon, I received a call from a neighbor whose child had attended the wedding. "Grace," she said, voice trembling slightly, "I wanted to tell you something. Watching you choose your path, even when it seemed hard, taught my son something important. He learned that it's okay to say no when it matters, and that following your heart can be brave too. Thank you for that." I paused, staring out my window at the golden light filtering through the trees. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, quiet joy. I realized that bravery is not just a personal journey, it is a gift we offer to others simply by living honestly. That evening, I sat with my sketchbook on my lap, reflecting on the journey I had been through. I thought about the wedding, the 15 children, the chaos and the laughter, and the decision that had changed everything. I thought about the moments of doubt, the fear that had almost held me back, and the quiet courage that had propelled me forward. And I realized that life is a series of choices, each one carrying lessons, each one shaping the person we become, each one leaving an imprint on the world around us. I began to share my story more openly, not for recognition, but as a way to encourage others to honor themselves. Friends, neighbors, even strangers online would reach out, thanking me for showing that it is possible to be kind without losing yourself, to be brave without being reckless, to live fully without sacrificing your heart. And each message, each conversation, each connection reminded me that courage is contagious. It spreads quietly, gently, invisibly, until it takes root in unexpected places. Late one night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights that shimmered like stars fallen to the earth. I thought about the path that had led me here, the struggles I had faced, the fears I had confronted, and the moments of quiet triumph that had shaped me. And I felt a profound sense of peace. I had chosen myself, not out of selfishness, but out of love, for my dreams, for my values, and for the people I cared about. I had discovered that bravery is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up in the simple act of saying no. Sometimes it is the quiet strength that allows you to live authentically, to inspire others, and to trust that everything will unfold as it should. And in that still golden night, I felt the warmth of a truth I had known all along, but had never fully embraced, that courage, kindness, and love are not mutually exclusive. They coexist, interwoven, shaping the way we live, the way we relate, and the way we touch the lives of those around us. And I understood with a clarity that filled me from head to toe that the bravest thing we can do is to honor ourselves, to follow our hearts, and to live with honesty and love every single day. A few months later, I received an unexpected email that made my heart skip a beat. It was an invitation to participate in a citywide art showcase, an opportunity I had dreamed about for years but never imagined I would actually receive. The showcase promised exposure to influential artists, gallery owners, and critics, and it felt like the culmination of every late night spent painting, every moment of doubt, every small act of persistence. But alongside the excitement, a familiar feeling crept in, the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and the nagging question of whether I was truly ready for such a stage. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the email, my hands trembling slightly. Part of me wanted to accept immediately, to dive in with the confidence I had been cultivating over the past months. But another part hesitated, remembering the lessons from the wedding, remembering the times I had second-guessed myself, wondering if I could ever live up to the expectations of others or even my own. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. The next day, I began preparing my pieces. I carefully selected the paintings that felt most true to my story, the ones that reflected my journey of courage, kindness, and self-discovery. I spent hours framing them, adjusting the lighting, making notes about the inspiration behind each work. As I worked, I reflected on how much I had grown since that day when I had declined the wedding babysitting. Back then, I had been afraid of disappointing others. Now, I was learning to honor myself while still carrying love and respect for those around me, and that balance felt empowering. When the day of the showcase arrived, I stood outside the gallery, my stomach tight with nerves. People were arriving, setting up their pieces, chatting in clusters about their work and their aspirations. I felt small for a moment, a tiny presence among so much talent and experience. But then I remembered the quiet lessons of the past months, that bravery comes in small, steady steps, that honesty and integrity matter more than perfection, and that showing up fully and authentically is itself a triumph. Inside the gallery, I placed my paintings carefully along the walls, taking in the vibrant energy of the room. As visitors began to arrive, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would people understand my work? Would they see the story behind each stroke, the struggle and growth embedded in every color and shape? But as I watched people pause, tilt their heads, smile, and linger, I felt a quiet affirmation. They were seeing it. They were witnessing the journey I had poured into my art, and in that moment, I realized that courage had led me here. Not just the courage to pursue art, but the courage to honor myself months ago, to say no when it mattered, and to trust that the world would respond in its own time. Throughout the evening, I spoke with strangers, fellow artists, and gallery owners. Each conversation reminded me of how far I had come. I shared the story of my choices, of the wedding, of the lessons in bravery and kindness. People listened with empathy, with curiosity, with warmth. Some even nodded, saying they had faced similar struggles in their own lives and that hearing my story gave them the courage to make their own difficult choices. My heart swelled with quiet pride. I realized that inspiration, like courage, is contagious. It spreads in ways we cannot always predict, touching lives, encouraging growth, and creating connection. By the end of the night, the gallery had emptied, leaving only the soft glow of the lights and the lingering scent of paint. I stood alone for a moment, looking at my work and thinking about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the wedding, the 15 children, the chaos, the choice I had made, and all the moments of quiet bravery that had followed. And I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Courage had guided me once again, showing me that fear is not an enemy but a companion, and that true strength comes from living authentically, with kindness, and with a willingness to embrace life's challenges fully. As I left the gallery that night, the cool air brushing against my face, I felt a quiet exhilaration. I had faced fear, honored myself, and discovered that bravery is not just about grand gestures, but about the steady, courageous choices we make every day. And I knew, with the certainty that filled me from head to toe, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength, the kindness, and the courage to meet them. The weeks after the showcase were a blur of messages, invitations, and unexpected opportunities. People reached out to ask about my work, to collaborate, to learn more about the story behind each painting. I had never imagined that my small, quiet decision months ago would ripple out in this way, shaping my life and touching others. And yet there it was, a testament to the power of courage, honesty, and the willingness to follow your heart even when the path feels uncertain. One afternoon, I received a phone call that left me stunned. It was the director of a well-known gallery in the city, someone whose name I had admired from afar for years. They told me they had seen my work at the showcase and that they were interested in hosting a solo exhibition for me. My hands shook as I listened, and for a moment, I felt the familiar twinge of fear. Could I live up to this? Could I handle the expectations, the attention, the scrutiny? But then I remembered everything I had learned. The lessons of the wedding, the months of growth, the quiet courage that had brought me this far. And I said yes, my voice steady, my heart full. As the months passed, I prepared for the solo exhibition, pouring everything I had into my art. Each painting became more than a visual expression. It became a story of resilience, of choice, of the courage to honor oneself. I thought about the people who had supported me, the family who had learned alongside me, the strangers who had been inspired by my honesty. I thought about the little moments of doubt, the nights spent questioning myself, and the quiet victories that had built the foundation for this new chapter. When the opening night arrived, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by my work and the people who had come to see it. There were familiar faces, family, friends, neighbors, alongside strangers who had heard about the exhibition and traveled to witness it. As I walked through the gallery, listening to their reactions, seeing their smiles, hearing their words of admiration and curiosity, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of fulfillment. I realized that every choice I had made, every moment of bravery and honesty had led to this. And in that realization, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for my family, for the journey, for the courage that had carried me here. During a quiet moment of the evening, my cousin approached me, her eyes glistening with tears. She took my hand and said softly, "Grace, I don't think I've ever been prouder of you. Watching you navigate your choices, your courage, your kindness, it has changed me, and it has changed all of us. You've shown us what it means to live fully and authentically." I felt my throat tighten as I nodded, unable to find words that could capture the depth of what I was feeling. Instead, I smiled, feeling the warmth of love, recognition, and shared growth wash over me. As the night wore on, people continued to move through the gallery, pausing at each painting, lingering over the stories, and asking questions that revealed their engagement and understanding. I realized that my art had become a bridge, a way to connect, to inspire, and to remind people of the quiet strength within themselves. And I understood fully that courage is not just about the bold decisions, but about the consistent, steady choices to live truthfully, to honor your heart, and to extend kindness even when it is challenging. By the end of the evening, the gallery was emptying, and I stood alone for a moment, taking in the space I had created. The walls were filled with color, life, and story, each piece a testament to my journey and to the quiet bravery that had carried me here. I thought about the wedding, the 15 children, the chaos and the laughter, and the decision that had set me on this path. I thought about every fear I had faced, every doubt I had confronted, and every act of honesty that had led to this moment. And I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, fulfillment, and pride. That night, as I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I realized that life is full of moments that test us, moments that ask us to choose between fear and courage, between obligation and love. And I knew, with a certainty that filled me from head to toe, that the bravest thing we can do is to honor ourselves, to trust in our path, and to live with honesty, kindness, and love in every step. The weeks after the solo exhibition felt almost surreal. Life moved forward, but I carried with me a quiet sense of accomplishment and peace that had been building for months, ever since that pivotal day when I had chosen myself over the wedding chaos. That choice, small in the eyes of some but monumental in my heart, had set off a ripple effect that touched every corner of my life. It reminded me that courage is not always loud, that bravery is often quiet, steady, and rooted in honesty and love. I began to notice the subtle ways in which my journey inspired others. Friends shared stories of how they had learned to say no without guilt, how they had found the courage to pursue dreams they had long neglected. My family continued to grow in understanding and respect, each of us learning to honor our boundaries while still offering love and support. Even strangers reached out, telling me that my story and my art had given them hope and strength to navigate their own challenges. It was humbling and heartwarming, and I realized that true courage is never contained. It spreads, nurtures, and transforms quietly, almost invisibly, until it touches lives in ways we cannot fully measure. One crisp morning, I found myself walking through a small park near my apartment. The air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves, and children's laughter echoed in the distance. I watched a mother guide her little one through a puddle, the child splashing and giggling uncontrollably, and I smiled. I thought about the 15 children at the wedding, the chaos, the laughter, the spilled juice and toppled chairs. I realized that life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes overwhelming, but it is also full of joy, growth, and opportunity, and sometimes the bravest choice is the one that allows both you and others to thrive. That evening, I sat at my window with a cup of tea, sketchbook on my lap, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark sky. I reflected on everything that had led me here, the struggles, the fears, the doubts, the small victories, and the moments of quiet bravery. I realized that courage is a collection of choices, each one shaping the person we become, each one influencing the world around us in ways we may never fully see. I had learned to embrace fear, to honor my heart, to live authentically, and to extend kindness without sacrificing myself. And in that practice, I had discovered a profound sense of freedom, fulfillment, and joy. My thoughts drifted to the people I loved, the family who had grown alongside me, the friends who had supported me, and the strangers who had been touched by my story. I understood that courage is not only about facing external challenges, but also about facing your own doubts and fears, about trusting yourself to make the right choices even when it feels uncomfortable. And I knew deeply that by living this way, I was leaving a quiet legacy, one of integrity, compassion, and the gentle power of choosing oneself with love in your heart. As night fell and the city grew still, I felt a deep sense of contentment settle within me. I had faced fear and uncertainty, I had embraced honesty and kindness, and I had lived my truth fully. And in that living, I had inspired others, strengthened bonds, and discovered a quiet, unshakable strength I had never known I possessed. I understood that life would continue to bring challenges, moments of doubt, and opportunities to grow, but now I was ready, confident in my ability to face them with courage, grace, and love, and in the soft glow of my apartment, surrounded by my art, memories, and the lessons of the past months, I realized something simple and profound. The bravest, kindest, and most inspiring thing we can do is to honor ourselves, follow our hearts, and live authentically. For in that living, we touch others in ways we may never fully understand, and we create a life that is both beautiful and meaningful, full of courage, kindness, and hope. I smiled, closed my sketchbook, and felt at peace.